Hi, I'm building a boat in my garage, and this is an 11-foot version of the Glen-L Squirt. Glen-L is a do-it-yourself home builder company. They prepare plans for these wooden boats. Most of them are built out of plywood, and this particular plan set dates back to the 1950s. It's a very popular plan set. It's only a two-seater boat. This is a 1/4-inch plywood hull. And one of the bigger challenges with these things is the boat is actually modeled after something that looks like the Cris-Crafts of the day, the 1950s model mahogany runabout. And they're very popular with their visual appeal, but how do you take a plywood hull and make it look like it is planked with mahogany? So this is one of the tricks that I saw on the internet. Didn't see anybody to put anything together exactly how to do it. I read a bunch of blog posts, but this is finally the end result of a little bit of trial and error, but we got there, and this is what I would like to share with you. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking mahogany plywood. It basically looks like this. Mahogany veneer. It looks like this. It's very thin. Cutting into strips, staining it, using an epoxy system, and vacuum bagging, which is the trick to making it look like this. So we're going to take the hull that looks boring like this and make it look exciting like this. Stick with us. In order to do that, we're going to use a vacuum bagging system, and that is something that's used to make composite parts. It requires a vacuum pump, a sealed system. You draw a vacuum on it, and when you draw the vacuum on that system, it compresses and holds pressure onto the part. It'll draw out all the air, and it will, if you allow it to sit over time, when you allow the epoxy to cure, or the whatever your adhesive is, when you allow your adhesive to cure, it will it'll adhere tight to the shape of whatever it is that you're doing. So if you've got a curvilinear shape or something that's really wavy, it'll comply, and it'll go right in every valley and every nook and every cranny that you need it to. So I'm going to step over to the bench. I'm going to show you what we have, all the pieces, parts that go into this. I've got a makeshift selfie stick here. I'm not used to really doing this with that, so let's see. All right, so the first thing is the veneer. The veneer is this is a mahogany material. It's 2-ply, so it's got a good side and it's got a backing side. And what I'm using is a 2-part or 2-piece, 2-layer. You can see it's very, very thin. This comes in 4x8 sheets. This is red mahogany. It's got the ply in one direction, which is your good face, and then on the opposite face, the ply goes in the opposite direction to give it strength. So if you were ever to take this material and bend it in the parallel with the grain, and you're bending it to try to do this, it's the material in the back that gives it its strength to stop it from cracking. Same thing in the other direction. So otherwise, it would just come completely apart. This comes in 4-foot by 8-foot sheets. That's about $30-40 a sheet. I got this from Hardwood Supply. I got 2 sheets for $40. It wasn't a big deal. I got 2 sheets to do the entire hull. But this stuff, it cuts very easy. You can cut it with a scissor. You can cut it with a shop knife. And what I've been using is a razor blade, just a regular utility knife. And the utility knife, you can take the part and just simply with a straight edge or whatever your shape is, and just cut it. So cut it in one direction, you can see, boom, yeah, suddenly magically it's in two. So this stuff is very easy to use. It's very pliable. You can cut it very easily. So what I've been doing is, what I've discovered with this is that the best thing to do is to on this particular boat, which let me show you again, my shop dog in the way, but on the hull, it's already stained, and this material is not stained. So to me, I feel like the best thing to do is to cut it out into the shapes, to go ahead and stain it. And I've been using a Minwax stain, just a penetrating stain. It's oil based. You stain them. You cut the pieces out, stain them, and the reason why I like cutting them out first and staining them rather than staining the whole sheet first is when you cut the edges will be raw and colored if you cut them first and stain them. So that's what I've been doing. So I want to show the vacuum bagging. The vacuum bagging equipment. I've had to make some of my own pieces, parts. This like for example, this vacuum pump. This vacuum pump that I have is a piece of medical equipment. Get down where we can see it. It's a piece of medical equipment. This is a Gomco pump. It's only it's a small little bitty pump. I tried looking this up on the internet to find what this was, and ended up buying it used on eBay. And I had to put together some pieces parts. I had to order on the internet. I had to order a vacuum control switch. Went to the hardware store, got a whole bunch of plumbing, got a valve, connected the made a reservoir tank out of some PVC, and then used an aquarium 1/4 inch anti-backflow, because the pump won't hold vacuum. You can draw vacuum, you can close the valve, but this whole thing, this, I'm sure you can make this out of the pumps that they use for air conditioning equipment that you get from Harbor Freight. I'm sure that this pump and that pump are pretty comparable. This doesn't draw a whole lot. It's not a whole lot of volume, but it draws a hell of a lot of vacuum. Onto this is one of the critical part, which is the port, the vacuum port that goes onto the vacuum bagging, which is this. You cut a hole in the vacuum bag, and then this here will turn. It's got a cam lock, and it gets tighter, so that'll make this airtight into your vacuum bag. So when we're talking about vacuum bagging, there are several components that go into this, and the vacuum bagging is made up of a layered system. You basically have your substrate, your part that you're going to vacuum, that you're going to adhere. So this gets epoxied first. You put the epoxy down, put the part down. I've been finding on this vertical surface, I've been finding that thumbtacks have been helping out a heck of a lot to hold this on the side of the hull. And that worked out great. Thumbtacks to me was a big key. So the first layer that goes down is a layer of what they call peel-ply, and this is a synthetic material. It's kind of satiny, silky, and it's supposedly impregnated with some non-stick. This is actually a used piece that I cut off yesterday. You can see it's got some of the some residue from what we were doing yesterday. So the first thing is a substrate, your piece that you're gluing down, and the peel-ply. The peel-ply is the first layer. Then on top of the peel-ply, there's a second layer that is a breathing membrane, and this is considered optional, I've read, but I ordered it in a whole setup, in the whole kit, so this came with it. This has actual breather holes. You can see the little dots in the picture. So that's the second layer. First the peel-ply, then that breather layer. Then finally you need a breathing, what they call this is a mat. So this breathing mattress, this will actually allow air to go from one side of the vacuum bagging to the center, to where your vacuum port is. So that's the third layer, and then the fourth layer is actually the vacuum bag. And this is nothing more than it's a softer version of almost like, it's like a drop cloth. It's like a plastic drop cloth, like visqueen. But this is it's very pliable. It's very rugged. It's made for the job. All of these pieces, I believe, come in, I think it's 54 inch widths. So that's the last thing that goes on there. To seal the system, there's a black mastic material that is, it's a bituminous butyl. I think it's bitumen and butyl, something like that. So this is a 1/2 inch wide strip. It's very thin. It's got a slick paper on it in order to be able to apply it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just lay this out and put, I'm going to assemble this, if I can not make a mess. Now if you're doing a curved part, you have to pleat the bag, the vacuum bag. You have to actually pleat it, and in order to do that, you really need to run that tape. If you end up doing this and you fold it, it's called a pleat. You have to have that mastic running all along that, so that when you fold it, it actually seals that fold. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to actually, before I put it down, I'm going to cut a little X in the plastic, and that's to give room for my vacuum port. So let's take this off, put this piece inside of the fabric, put it down here a little bit before it sticks. Turn it to get it tight. Pull it down over the edges. This is going to have to be taken down really, really tight. You got to really shut it down. Make sure you get all the seams. It's very easy when you're doing a very large area to lose vacuum through. It's like death by a thousand cuts. You end up with a whole bunch of little small little creases like this one that won't seal. And if you do that around a part that's got 5 feet on the top, 5 feet on the bottom, 2 feet on both sides, you have quite a lot of tape area that might not stick. So now that I've got this sealed, turn on the vacuum pump and you can see what's going on with that. You can start to see the part. It immediately draws down. It's pulled all of the corners tight. Everything's tight. You can see the fabric being pulled down. In fact, if you look really good, you can see the shadow of the different layers. That's actually the veneer underneath. That's its outline. That's how much pressure is being applied to this. You can see the breather layer membrane here even has a ridge. So you got the fabric has a every layer is going to show a ridge. So this is really drawing a heck of a lot of vacuum. And that's pretty much it. You let this run, and as long as you got a good seal, the pump, this particular pump will cycle on and off, and it might run with the epoxy that I'm using. I'm using the West System. Shut this down so we can hear what we're doing. I'm using the West System epoxy, which it's a gallon resin, and then it's the hardener, one part of the hardener to 5 parts of the resin, and I've got the pump shot system, which is just one pump shot to one pump shot. I'm also using a filler. I'm using microfibers to thicken the epoxy. All of this cleans up with acetone. This system will also accept just about anything to color it. I actually insert about a quarter teaspoon of stain in a plastic cup with about this much material, about 5 pump shots, 5 pump shots. Handful of the microfibers and about a quarter teaspoon of the stain. Stir it up, paint the hull, paint the back of the veneer, and apply the system, all the layers, the butyl tape, the vacuum pump. Let it run. Maybe 4 hours later. At least it depends on the temperature, but in like today's it's maybe like 65 degrees outside right now. So it's going to take it about 4 hours or so to set up to where it's completely tacked. I just want to show a quick shot of the epoxy. So this is the epoxy that I'm mixing up, and you can kind of see how liquidy it is. It's very runny. It doesn't have a whole lot of body. So if you're using this as an adhesive on a vertical surface, it's not going to work very well. You can see it's dark. Both of these, the hardener and the basic resin, are crystal clear. They don't dry crystal clear with multiple layers. I think they have a little bit of a yellow tint. You can't really tell in everything I've been putting on it because it's already amber wood. But this material here is very runny. So what we're going to do is I'm going to add some of the microfibers to thicken it, and you can see what the microfiber is. It's basically a very fine. In fact, if you see the dust coming up in a plume, but that's going to go in. I'm going to put in probably about half the volume, maybe a third of the volume of what's in this cup. I'm going to put in microfibers and mix that in and thicken it. So let me do that, and then I'll show you what that looks like. It's not just to show you I've added some already, but I'm going to show you what it looks like when you're actually handling it. I put a lot more than that in it, but I just want to show you how it blends when you stir this up. I'm trying to do this with one hand. I need 2, but I'm holding the phone. Now you can kind of see what the consistency is like. It's a lot thicker. It's got a lot more viscosity. This, when you paint this on a vertical surface like the side of that hull, it's still going to want to run down the side. So you can only put a little thin little layer on it. And this will not hold the wood by itself under its own tack. So that's why I'm using thumbtacks. And you'll see how that comes out in just a second. So what I'm using to apply the epoxy is a inexpensive China bristle brush. These guys, I'm sure you've seen these. They're probably $1 a piece. I don't know. They're cruddy for painting, but they're perfect for this because after you use it in the epoxy's going to harden in on the brush, so you can't clean it. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to take my epoxy. I'm actually going to brush it onto the side of the hull, and then I will be brushing it onto the back of each piece as I put them on. So it's not a very exciting process. It's very boring, but basically I just want to show you how it applies and how it goes on. And right now it's got a good tackiness. I can feel it. You can see how the color, it almost looks like grape jelly when it goes on there. It's so thin. But this needs to be applied over the entirety of the hull. You should only work in an area that's as big as what you can reasonably get done. I'm only going to go maybe 4 feet or so up the hull today. I don't feel like doing a whole big huge patch. What I'm going to do this. Got all my pieces on the floor. They're already been pre-marked, pre-cut, pre-stained, ready to go. And after I paint the hull, I'm going to paint the back of each individual piece as I put them up. We'll thumbtack them in place in position, and that ought to do it. So I'm going to get this done, and I will come back to you in just a bit. Okay, so I've already got one veneer strip up on the top. I've got it thumbtacked, but I do want to show you how much epoxy I'm actually applying to this strip. You can see it's not a whole lot. Just trying to get a very thin coat on it. You don't want a whole lot because this vacuum bagging process will definitely squeeze out anything that's in here. It'll squeeze it out and it'll come out. You don't have to worry about the coverage. As long as you don't have any holidays, I think you're doing pretty good. But all I'm doing now is just applying this. Once I put it in, all of these have been pre-cut. Put them in. Make sure I got enough clearance off the edge. These two were already, you can kind of see how they fit together. Just a little thumbtack into the end to hold it in place. Thumbtack into the other end. And that's it. So what I'm going to do is over the process, I'll end up cleaning up some of this overage. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little bit of goop that's starting to come out on the edge here. And just to keep it clean, I try to cut that down. So I'll take some of the acetone, and then I'll wipe that down before I put the bag over it. So I'm going to go ahead and do the area that I'm going to do, and then we'll come back once I actually go to apply the bag. Okay, so now we have all the veneers adhered to the side of the hull. The epoxy, you can see I painted the epoxy to the edge of where every plank ends. There's no sense in putting any epoxy on any area that's not going to be covered in this go round. A couple of extra tips. You want to make sure that the back side of your planks don't have any debris, because anything in here, any little any bit of trash or debris will end up holding this out and will cause there to be a bump. I don't know if you can see it, but see how that moves a little bit? And you can even hear it, like once it adheres and then it pulls back off. So that's what the vacuum bag is going to eliminate. It's going to make sure all that's applied uniformly. Now, one more thing I do want to point out is that when I put the mastic and I have that butyl tape, and the butyl tape goes all along the edge of this gunnel, you notice that I've got epoxy sealed all through this. In some areas I do have a few holidays back here I haven't sealed, but this is going to be part of the trick, because it will find, when you're trying to vacuum bag, it'll try to find a hole in the hull every which way that it can to seep air into the vacuum bag. So we got to be very careful when I run the butyl tape that I cover all these holes. So I'm going to go inside and go cut out the 4 layers of fabric and vacuum bag, And we'll come out here, and what we're going to do is we're going to temporarily secure it up top with thumbtacks, and then I'm going to drape it over. And then on the bottom, I do want to also point out that with all of this filling material, I'm going to use the acetone to wipe all of this down to make sure that I've got a nice clean, dust-free surface for that butyl tape to adhere to. Because if it's got a little bit of a powdery surface and you try to put that butyl to it, and it adheres to the powder but not necessarily the substrate, you will have a leak. It looks like it's going to seal, but then it might not. And then once you get this thing set up, you definitely don't want to have to fight to try to figure out where all those leaks are. So let me get to that point, and then we'll come back. Okay, so it's been a couple of hours since I mixed up the epoxy, started applying all the panels, and I've got the vacuum bag all set up on the hull. But I was able to do it, and as you can see up above my head here, I had to splice in a little piece here because the width of the roll was only to this first piece of masking tape. So I've been spending my time with the pump, the vacuum pump, trying to get this camera stable. Been spending my time with the vacuum pump, which is down here on the floor, trying to get it to hold vacuum, and it took a little while going around the entire hull to get everything tightened up, but we finally got it. So turn the pump on, and you can start to see everything's going to draw tight. You can see the bag really pulling snug against everything. In fact, all of the thumbtacks, you can see now all the thumbtacks at the end of the board, end of each board is coming in. You can see how the vacuum really pulls the planks down. Look at the epoxy that's now weeped out of every seam and every edge. You can see how all those are now, like, this is really filled in. And I don't know if you caught that, but the pump just cycled off, which is a great news because it means I've got a really good seal around here. So right now it's actually holding vacuum. The pump is going to cycle like this for a few hours. I'm going to probably let this go for at least 3 hours. I've got 2 hours in the epoxy. I think it'll probably be tacked up in a good 4. And once you get it to that point, it's not going to want to peel off. So as long as you got it to where it's mostly adhered, then you can take all this down. And what I thought worked really well for me was taking this off while the epoxy was still a little bit green. So I was able to use the acetone, pull all the thumbtacks out, use the acetone and wipe down any of the excess epoxy that's going to bleed out. One of the things that will happen too is not only will it bleed out in these edges, but it'll also bleed out in every one of these folds. I tried to get this as smooth as I could, but you can see it's really difficult when you have a loose piece of fabric and then suddenly you pull pressure on it and now it's tight. So this will go for maybe 3 hours like this with the pump just cycling on and off. Just come out here every 30 minutes or so and just make sure things are trucking along fine. But we're just about out of the woods now, so this'll I'm very confident that this will turn out well. Okay, this vacuum system's been trucking along now for maybe about 3 or 4 hours or so. I think I've mixed my first batch of epoxy at 11:30 this morning. It's almost 5 o'clock now. So the epoxy's had 5.5 hours of age on it, 5 hours or so, at least on the original parts. And then the stuff that I did later is a little bit greener than that. But it's about time to start pulling this off. The vacuum pump's been running. It's been cycling on and off, and so now I'm ready to shut it down, because what I want to do is I want to pull a vacuum off, pull a peel-ply off, pull everything, all the bagging off, and then take my rag and some acetone, and I'm going to wipe all this down. So let's just get started. Ta-da! Okay, so looking at it, you can see there's a little bit of work to be done. I noticed that the epoxy definitely weeped out where I said it would. It also, and sure enough, I don't know if you can see it, I'm gonna have to bring this in a little bit, but you can see it's got a little epoxy residue right exactly where the fold was, and that's what I figured was gonna happen. So this is what I'm talking about. With all the epoxy that has seeped through the holes, seeped through the creases and everything, this is going to take a little bit of touching up. So you can see one of the things that catches my eye, that caught my attention right here, is right here, the epoxy. When I just pulled the peel-ply off, the peel-ply actually pulled some of the stained veneer, just a little bit of it, just a little bit of the grain here. So that's going to want to be touched up, which is why I think right now is the best time. While it's still green, it's still a little tacky. So in fact, you can see my finger kind of pull that up. Now it's perfect. We can take this, pull all these thumbtacks out, take the acetone and wipe this down and get this cleaned up. So let me go ahead and do that. I do also want to say that some of these low spots, like this is a big old gob that came through one of the holes where the thumbtack was. That's easier to scrape off right now. You can take a razor blade and just go from the top side across, and then this will basically peel right up. So it'll almost like roll up like gum, and then you can wipe the residue off with the acetone. I think that's it. I'm really pleased with it. Now that I got it wiped down, you can see how nice it comes out. That is killer. I like that a lot. See if I can get this camera to stop wiggling. But if you can get a good look at that. Really pleased with it. So, there you have it. Vacuum bagging, epoxy, veneer, it's all there. I hope that this is helpful to someone. I hope that you really like the video. I hope that you get something out of it or are able to make use of it in some sort of which way. But I was really happy to be able to do it. So thank you for watching. Appreciate it. Good luck.